people will join as we get started. And again, we're recording this, so if anyone misses the meeting, if you know that there are people who wanted to attend but can't, we will have the recording as a resource. So hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Sweat. I work for Oregon Sea Grant. I do marine renewable energy community engagement, and I've been working with Jeff Burright, who's here, and he is the lead for the Oregon Offshore Wind Energy Roadmap. And so these lunch and learns came up out of the roadmap as a way to provide extra education, extra information on kind of some of the key topic areas that have come up that have to do with offshore wind. So today we're talking about coastal energy resilience, and we're kind of taking a step back from just thinking about offshore wind in one context and thinking about it in a broader energy context and learning a little bit about what resilience is, and hopefully asking some questions and learning some new things that will help any roundtable members here kind of bring those considerations into the roadmap. And Jeff, if you if you're here and you want to give a quick little couple minutes introduction about the roadmap, just for the people here who aren't on the roundtable, that would be great.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Jeff Burright. I work for the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and I'm leading the development of this offshore wind roadmap for the state. About a year ago, the Oregon legislature commissioned DLCD to develop this offshore wind roadmap with the purpose of identifying the standards that ought to be considered in the state if offshore wind is going to happen. This roadmap is not the vehicle by which the state's going to decide whether offshore wind happens or not. Really, what we're trying to do is define what a path to offshore wind could look like for Oregon in order to be responsible. And then from that, what actions, investments, policies do we need to be thinking about now that could allow a path like that to happen? We're also looking at other alternative futures for the coast that include other types of economic development that could support offshore wind in other places. And we're also, in our discussions among the Roadmap Roundtable, including a no action alternative, if you will, where we're looking at what the coast looks like as we look into the future without an energy generation source of its own in the way that offshore wind could provide. And so for me, what I'm really excited about here learning is to kind of flesh out that no action alternative by really understanding what is the picture of coastal energy resilience today? What are the challenges that are being faced? What are the things that people are looking to already as ways to address those challenges? So I'm here to learn just as much as everybody else. And yeah, with that, I'd like to invite Odo to jump in and tell us all something.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jeff. I'll just add one more thing. I encourage everyone to kind of listen to this with an open mind, even though offshore wind is obviously what has brought us together today. We all have an interest in that, and we probably all have very different perspectives and opinions on offshore wind. I just want to remind everyone to please respect each other during the meeting, and also just be mindful if you want to ask a question of your speaking time. And yeah, thanks, Jeff, for the introduction again, and thank you, Tom, Hannah, Max, and Traci, for joining us today and providing us with this discussion. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for that, Sarah. So I will kick us off with some quick intros and a little bit about ODOE, and then you'll see we've got a little bit of an agenda mapped out here. But I'm really looking forward to the discussion and excited to be here today. So to start with, I'm Traci Naile. I'm the Energy Security Manager at ODOE. I joined the agency last November in this position. So I'm really excited around any time we get to engage with our stakeholders and our other partners, because I always learn something. So I'm really looking forward to that today. And I'll just kind of give you an overview of who's going to be speaking, and then they can talk a little bit more as we get to their parts of it. So Hannah Satein is our County Energy Resilience Program coordinator, and she'll really be kicking us off here to talk about resilience and what that means to us. And then Tom Cecilia comes out of the kind of more nuclear side of things in our group, but really supports us on our fuels and our energy sector response piece, as well as the energy security plan. So I wanted to make sure we highlight everybody today. And then we've got Max Woods, of course, our assistant director for our division, which is nuclear safety and energy security. So you'll hear all of us at various times, I think, throughout the presentation and the discussion. Hannah, you can go ahead. Yeah, thank you. So just a quick overview of what ODOE does. This is us. This is our mission and what we really try to do every day to implement that mission. In general, trying to help Oregonians make those decisions about energy and making sure that we can maintain that resilient and affordable energy system. So coastal energy resilience, of course, fits right into that. So that's, again, what we'll explore a little bit today. Thinking about clean energy, protecting the environment, of course, our public health responsibilities. All of those are part of the mission we really try to implement as the agency. More specifically, we are that repository of data and information and analysis. And for us specifically on energy security, we are really a repository. That's part of what we do is synthesize, gather that information and synthesize it and talk about this energy and resilience concept and how we move that forward in our state. Part of that is trying to look at those energy challenges. One thing that will be coming up over the next few years is what is the Oregon energy strategy and how does energy security connect with that? So I don't know if Max or anybody wants to drop into the chat while I'm chatting about the energy strategy, but that's open for public comment right now. So another resource there for you to look at and provide feedback to our agency. Of course, this is a great opportunity as we think about education. So we want to talk today about what is resilience, but how that fits into the idea of energy security for us. And then, how we move forward with our programs and oversight. Again, for what we talk about today, we don't have a regulatory authority related to energy security as a program or concept, but we really try to make sure we incorporate regulatory aspects as well as that resilience, affordability, and how do we make all of those things intersect and integrate into a good plan to move forward for our state. I think that is Hannah. I think I'm handing off. Oh, nope, sorry, agenda here. I put the slides together. I should know what they are, but it's one of those days. So with the agenda today, again, we're kind of high level here. I'll be handing off to Hannah to talk about resilience. Then Tom's going to fill in a little bit of information about the electric grid. And then we really want to get into that discussion. So we've left a significant amount of time to talk about some questions we have, some things that we think about. And when I say questions we have, things we don't necessarily have the answers to, but we want to hear from all of you and what you think about those, especially as we can help with anything related to the roadmap and how we can contribute potentially information or other insights into that. Right, now I'll hand off to Hannah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Traci. Hey, everybody. Hannah Satein, as Traci introduced me. I'm our County Energy Resilience Program Coordinator. And I'm going to kick off our presentation today talking about resilience, what, why, and how. So we're going to start with the what and define energy resilience. So energy resilience can be defined as the ability of energy systems from production through delivery to end users to withstand and rapidly restore energy delivery following non-routine disruptions of severe impact or duration. So I want to break down a few of those pieces. When we're talking about energy systems, we're thinking about all of them. So our electricity, our natural gas, and our liquid fuels. We're thinking about the generation of energy all the way down the system to you and I receiving it in our homes and our offices. And we're thinking about disruptions that are being caused by natural disasters, cyber attacks, physical attacks, and critically, these are non-routine. So they're of less frequency and greater severity than an everyday issue. Some two words that are very similar that you might have heard in the energy world are resilience and reliability. And we often hear, what is the difference between resilience and reliability? So resilience is really hitting at the non-routine, the severity, less frequent disruptions, and reliability is really in the wheelhouse of the everyday. So, you could think of an average winter weather, average winter day, or a branch falling on a power line, or a tree, versus a windstorm that has countywide impacts, or the January 2024 extreme winter weather that was experienced in the Willamette Valley, or regional cyber attacks. So really, reliability is speaking to being able to handle disruptions that are on a more regular, average scale, versus resilience as these really strong, non-routine, severe impacts. So moving on to the why. Why do we talk about resilience? Why do we care about energy resilience? First and foremost, energy underpins our critical services, our critical lifelines. So we think about hospitals, medical services, emergency response, transportation, access to our fuel supply. All of these services and more are underpinned by access to our other energy systems, and there's interdependencies between them. So we need to have access to energy on our blue sky days, and we need to have access to energy on our black sky days, our emergency days. It's really fundamental. And we're also talking about it, you're hearing about it more because we're having an increased frequency and severity of disruptions, increased frequency and severity of extreme weather. One very pertinent to us in Oregon and the West Coast are wildfire, of course, and also having increased frequency of disruptions from public safety power shutoffs. So utilities preventatively shutting off electricity to help prevent extreme wildfire from happening. We have the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, of course, not a new threat, but one that we're increasingly aware of the need to prepare for, and of course also has unparalleled severity risk for our region. And then cybersecurity threats, cybersecurity incidents are increasing, and our energy systems are also becoming more digital, which has important resilience benefits, but also increases vulnerability to cybersecurity events. And we also care about energy because some populations are more vulnerable to energy disruptions. This could be because households may have fewer resources to increase their own personal resilience, because they face more exposure during a disruption, or because they have more physical vulnerability to the impacts of disruptions, or a combination of the above. So when we pursue resilience across our energy systems and within our communities, we help limit and reduce the negative impacts of not having energy for our critical services, and also help ensure equitable protection for community members. So moving on to the how, and also a little bit of the who. How is energy resilience pursued? Who is working on it? So entities across scales pursue energy resilience. Tribal governments work on it, federal and state governments, local governments, community organizations, utilities, energy providers, of course, and individuals. So we'll break down what those actions look like across some of those groups. Right here is a photo of power lines being undergrounding of power lines. So this is in the utility bucket of actions, and it falls within hardening infrastructure. So things like taking overhead lines and undergrounding them, or replacing wooden poles with steel or concrete poles, or elevating substations, are one group of activities that utilities are really engaged in to help increase their resilience. Vegetation management is another key resilience activity, implementing smart grid technologies to help improve detection of outages, reroute power to limit their impact, and speed repairs, and speed recovery. That's a really important bucket of activities as well. Utilities also, some of them offer grant or loan programs for communities or residents to install backup power devices. and then also partnering with communities on energy resilience projects. So that brings us to the community bucket. Really important for communities in pursuing energy resilience is backing up those critical public service facilities. So making sure that hospitals, emergency response, water supply, fuel supply have the backup energy resources they need, generation and storage, to be able to have power during disruptions. This includes community resilience centers, which are spaces that residents can go during a disruption to access energy services. So critically heating, cooling, air filtration, as well as charging for communication devices or medical devices. This can take a variety of forms. So communities may pursue increasing their fuel supply and diversity of fuels. They may increase fuel-based generators or pursue renewable energy projects that are either off-grid or have storage and islanding capabilities, or something like a microgrid, which is what is up on the screen. A microgrid is what it kind of sounds like, right? A mini grid where you have multiple energy generation and storage resources and multiple loads, and it can connect to the utility grid when the grid is functioning, and it can disconnect or island when it is not, allowing the community, the loads that are on it, to have a power source and allowing utilities to safely repair the rest of the grid or the part of the grid that is impacted. So moving on to, also in the community bucket, I should say, our planning activities can be education and outreach to residents to help increase their awareness, as well as supporting household resilience activities. For the federal and state government, the roles focus around planning efforts, coordination between utilities, energy providers, public entities, private sector. Sometimes takes the form of regulations to help increase resilience, as well as grant programs for planning and projects. And then for tribal governments, it's a combination of planning, collaboration, and investing in project implementation. And something just to highlight is that as these entities pursue resilience, there are opportunities to pair resilience activities and projects to support other goals for emergency management, energy development, and community development. So a lot can get done in the name of resilience. So we wanted to highlight a few opportunities that are ongoing at ODOE right now. So the first one is the County Energy Resilience Program. This is the program that I have the opportunity to coordinate. It is a state-funded program that awards $50,000 per Oregon county to develop a county-wide energy resilience plan. We have 19 counties of our 36 that have chosen to participate, including 2 cohorts or groups of counties, and 3 coastal counties, Lane, Clatsop, and Tillamook, are involved in the program. And going back to that community energy resilience, the focus of these plans is really to identify where alternate energy generation and storage resources are needed for critical public service facilities, set a vision around what that backup generation and storage will look like, and then also identify locations for community resilience centers. So our counties are underway in their planning, with plans due December 31st of this year. The next program is the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. This is another state-funded program, and it really serves as a sister program to the County Energy Resilience Planning program. So, communities identify a vision, a suite of projects they want to implement, and then they can come over to the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program and apply for a planning grant of up to $100,000, or a project construction or implementation grant for up to $1 million. These are to fund renewable energy projects and renewable energy projects with a resilience component. We do have an application opportunity right now that's open until September 19th, and program staff anticipate that there will be another round of funding that opens in late 2026. And then lastly, we have the Grid Resilience Grant Program. This is a federally funded program through the U.S. Department of Energy that ODOE is administering, and this funds grants to utilities, both investor-owned and consumer-owned utilities in the state, to pursue those resilience activities that we discussed. So it could look like hardening activities, vegetation management, implementing microgrids or battery storage, smart grid technologies, all of the above. We had 13 applicants in our first round of funding, and 6 have fully moved through the award phase with Department of Energy and are in project implementation, including the Coos Curry Electric Cooperative, which is pursuing undergrounding 2.2 miles of their lines. There will be a future round of funding that's anticipated, with ODOE staff hoping to learn more from Department of Energy in September about what that might look like. And from there, I'm going to pass it on off to Tom.
Thanks, Hannah. So instead of talking about microgrids, I want to talk about sort of the macro grid, looking at the energy ecosystem in the state. The Energy Security Plan talks about the whole energy system. I want to focus just on electric here. And to start off, I want to point out that Oregon does obviously have electric generation, but we also import and export electricity depending on the season. When we have a surplus, we share with our neighbors, and when we don't, we get electricity from the neighbors. Most of the electricity generation in the state is hydroelectric, the blue pentagons on the map here. Then second is natural gas, the orange triangles. The wind is going to be a sort of blue rectangle, and solar and biomass are rounded out. Along the coast, there isn't a lot of generation. There's a couple biomass plants sort of in the central northern areas of the coast. But the vast majority of the generation is in the Columbia Gorge area, where it's windy and there's water for hydro and wind, and then solar in Eastern Oregon. And I know this image might be a little hard to see, so it's zoomable in the Energy Security Plan, which is linked. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about how that energy gets to where it needs to be. So this is if you picture the grid as sort of a roadways, this goes sort of highway level. Microgrids are sort of the residential neighborhoods, but we have a map here of sort of the electric highways. You'll notice that a lot of the generation is coming from the gorge and then going south. Oh, lost. Can we go back a page?
Sorry about that, Tom.
No worries. One more. Okay, so where the electricity goes from the points of generation to the population centers. So from the gorge down the Deschutes, and then over to the Willamette Valley, and then to get to the coast, the grid transmission lines tend to follow roadways, because that's where trees have been cleared and it's easy to get to, the passes and whatnot. Now, when we're talking about resilience and response, I tend to think on the scale of a Cascadia subduction zone event, because if you can plan for the worst, then the stuff below that is easier to respond to. So if we think about how the response for a Cascadia event would be, we'd be getting support from the rest of the country, coming in mostly east of the Cascades, then working its way into the Willamette Valley, and then across those passes as we rebuild roads to the coast. That is the same route that the people repairing the electric grid would take. They would be sort of co-located with the road crews as the lines are cleared and repaired and rebuilt. So something I was thinking of when we're talking about generation on sort of west of the Coast Range, is that generation facility would need its own infrastructure, its own ecosystem of repairs and repair crews and supplies. So as these islanded communities are trying to be reconnected to the rest of the state, they have the resources they need to keep their little microgrids operating. So I guess the generation could be part of the picture, but it would need that local repair structure. So that's the electric ecosystem writ whole, and that's a lot of information to go through. So let's digest that and go to some questions with the next slide.
All right. Thanks to Tom and Hannah for all of that info. So like Tom said, kind of digest that. We're trying to leave a lot of time for discussion, so a lot of information that we moved through pretty quickly. And that under that idea of talking about how do we improve resilience, these are just some questions we had as kind of as starting points, but we really want to open it up to questions from everybody that's on here, and then we'll come back to these or use them as prompts if we need to. So we'll pause for a few seconds here and see if anybody has questions, additional things they want to throw in the chat, or come off mute. So I see one that came up from Bill. Are there viable terrestrial community scale renewable energy generation opportunities for Southwest Oregon communities, or are they only marine based? So I will. And the idea on the kind of discussion here is if anybody, it doesn't have to be me or Tom or Hannah or Max, so anybody in the group that wants to throw in ideas, and then I'll also open up, of course, to my colleagues here at ODOE to see if they have feedback as well.
Well, I can dive right in here, and thanks, Bill, for the question. This is Max Woods from Department of Energy. I think the answer to the question is absolutely. Smaller scale might consider a community level renewable energy project. Certainly could be solar, right? Terrestrial based, or perhaps some other type of technology, but usually we think of solar facilities. I mean, people might think that the weather, the clouds, or sort of the climate of the coast is not quite as ideal as maybe Eastern Oregon, but I think there's certainly sufficient capacity to have smaller scale renewable energy projects that are terrestrial on the coast.
And along those same lines, not necessarily on the renewable side, but in the 70s, there was a proposal to build a nuclear power plant in Florence. So that would have been a significant amount of electrical generation along the coast.
There was also an onshore wind project that's been contemplated. People probably are familiar with this in Curry County, I believe, decades ago. So I think there's people who have been contemplating renewable energy resources in the region for many years.
Right. And we've got somebody with a hand up. I don't see a full name on there, so I'll defer. You're the only person with your hand up, so.
Hey, Bryson, you're muted.
Bryson. Okay, yep, and you are muted.
Apologies. Yeah, so I was intrigued, and apologies, I missed the beginning because someone came into my office, but I'm intrigued of how do you sort of quantify resilience? Like, what's the metrics you used for doing that? And in moving forward, given what we see as demand growth and that sort of thing, is how do you see the resilience of the system changing in a do nothing type of scenario?
Right.
I guess I'll pop in here. I mean, as ODOE, I don't know that we necessarily quantify resilience numerically or have a program set up to do that in that way, though there could be a variety of metrics you could look at, right? So like, I think utilities do so, a number of outages, right? How frequently that is happening, for how long. And Max, Tom, Traci, please correct me if I'm wrong about what we do. So I think that would be one way to measure resilience is how long are people experiencing outages, for what frequency, what is the impact there, to answer that first part of your question.
So I'll jump in a little bit. In the energy security plan, we did a hazards assessment, which looked at the question more from I'll call it a maturity matrix, where we asked the utility companies to sort of do a self-assessment on how mature their resilience and hazard mitigation plans are. So we have at least one data point there. That's something we'll be building on over the years. We also used that to provide a list of potential mitigation measures that could be taken based on the hazards present. And obviously, all hazards aren't equally distributed around the state. So it really is a case-by-case basis, and there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all metric.
There's kind of a related question in the chat here about, it says from Julia, curious about what happens in the South Coast if we do nothing. Will prices go up or resilience decline? It's hard to answer sort of the first part of that question. Will prices go? I think prices, electricity prices, I assume is the question. Electricity prices are going up everywhere in the state, broadly speaking, some places more than others. And a lot of that cost increase, especially for the investor-owned utilities, is around wildfire resilience and other types of resilience measures that need to be implemented to keep our system safe and secure from hazards and threats. And you know, I would think the South Coast is no different. We should have resilience measures around the state, so all Oregonians benefit from those investments. You know, being at the end of the power line and you know, sort of literally, proverbially, but also literally, it is a bit of a challenge. You know, the map that Tom shows earlier really demonstrates sort of the lengths of the transmission system to get to South Coast, other parts of our state that are farther away from the generating resources. So.
And I want to clarify that do nothing doesn't actually mean do nothing. All of the utilities are making improvements to their systems because it's bad business to be out. So they're not going to do nothing. I think the do nothing scenario is not having offshore wind is as defined in this discussion. If I'm wrong, please let me know.
Yeah, no, I'll chime in on that one too. I agree. I think you know, folks are pursuing it, and communities across the coast are pursuing community energy resilience and planning and projects. And I think fortunately right now, you know, folks know this is a priority across the coast, across the state. And I think the best thing, you know, if you're interested in it is on a community scale is to engage with your community leadership, see what they're doing, what are those opportunities, you know, encouragement around continuing to pursue it. But I do think, fortunately, to Tom's point, both from utilities and a government perspective and community members, folks know it's a priority. So I don't think we have to be too worried about do nothing, but we could nudge towards, you know, more.
Yeah, and I'll jump into the follow-up question about additional transmission that I saw in the chat. Building transmission lines is hard on multiple levels. So if the transmission lines is enough sizable enough and long enough, there's a council that ODOE staffs, the Energy Facility Siting Council, that has an approval process which is designed to make sure that all stakeholders and environmental and cultural impacts are assessed. So it isn't a quick process. Hopefully it is an effective one that addresses all the concerns before the project is approved. But it can take years or decades to get a significant transmission line built.
There was a question here about, oh, Jeff, go ahead on the.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I want to go back to this question of, you know, how do we quantify resiliency or lack thereof? And maybe we don't have a great way to quantify it, but I'm curious, when you were doing the energy security plan work, were you hearing from utilities about, you know, if we have an outage of a day, we can handle it because we have diesel generators at our hospitals and we can keep our gas pumps running in our grocery stores, food won't spoil. But if we get past a certain amount of time, here's when we start to see effects, and here are the kinds of effects we would see. Did you have those kinds of of enlightening moments with them where you were able to start compiling what the real vulnerabilities are as time goes on?
We had those conversations for sure. And it's once again not a one size fits all response. The more established folks plans to ensure that they can provide services for days or weeks. But we still have other folks who have their plan is we have a generator, but they haven't run it ever. They don't test it. They don't know how it's connected. They don't know how to repair it. So it really is instance by instance, condition by condition, different.
Thanks. And Tom, I was struck by, and I agree with what you said about, it's one thing to have a generation source west of the Coast Range, but if you don't have lines to connect it to the places that need that power, it doesn't help you that much. Has there been any thought or talk among your team or others about kind of the relative value of having a generation source on the Coast Range versus other kinds of resilience measures like grid undergrounding, other kinds of hardening actions? Is there a better bang for the buck choice at this point, or do we know?
I think that's a good question, Jeff. And I don't know if we didn't get to that level of specificity in our analysis. It's building generation sources closer to population centers in general is easier, broadly speaking, right? Less distance to move transmission lines. Typically, you can provide power locally. But in diverse geographies like our state, in places where population centers are smaller, moving power across longer distances might be preferable from electricity power's perspective, not necessarily from a resilience perspective. I think it's a good question to look into, and we don't have an answer for you. The undergrounding of power lines is something that comes up a lot in our work. That's expensive. It's very expensive, but it is happening in certain areas. Some high voltage lines in very fire prone areas, particularly on, say, the east side of the Cascade Range, are being undergrounded for some segments just because it's the last option they can do. But undergrounding is quite expensive, and it's environmentally damaging too. It's not a perfect solution. So there's a trade-off everywhere you look.
And real just to level set expectations, the analysis that's in the energy security plan is on sort of a regional scale. We didn't get into community level interpretations. We looked at the 6 regions established by the Oregon Department of Emergency Management.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. I think that is an interesting analysis, and certainly, for offshore wind in particular, it raises that question of a sort of comparative benefit. I do think whenever you're talking about expanding transmission, I mean, there's cost and difficulty of process and different entities that need to come together, like on the coast. But it seems like a worthy question to potentially pursue.
And I think as I'm looking back towards some of the questions, so I want to make sure that we know we're going to hop back to those in a minute. I'll add to that too, as we really talk about developing the grid. We're here today from an energy security and resilience perspective, but PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, is a really important part of that conversation as well. So that's, as we think about how do we build lines, what needs to be, developed, where PUC really also has that expertise. So. All right. Let's see. I want to go back up to a few of the questions. This has been really good discussion, but I want to make sure we address what was in the chat as well. I know we had one earlier about green and blue hydrogen production. So Kevin had asked, is there any serious consideration of green blue hydrogen production in Oregon? And I think Max, you were planning to speak to that.
Yeah, hydrogen might be one of those things that's 10 years away and always will be. It's it is an expensive and sort of heavy industry challenge to put together hydrogen facilities, but people are working on it. There is uncertainty still at the federal level on funding for hydrogen-related projects. But as last that I know, we do still, there's a Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association that took advantage of federal funding. And Oregon has some specific projects related to that. Some of them are in Washington State, and I think one's in Montana. So there is some planning effort underway around sort of low carbon hydrogen, but I don't think it's a panacea to any challenges in the future, to be honest. It's a long ways away.
Max, that brings us to another question that also fits right under your expertise. So we'll jump to the one about small modular nuclear power and the potential for that. So
Yeah, that's a hot topic in the state and the nation right now. So nuclear power is not allowed to be built in Oregon right now, and we can talk specifics about that another time. We do get some power from nuclear in our state because there's a power plant in Washington, in the Tri-Cities, Washington, near Richland, the only commercially operating nuclear power plant in the region. And that power is marketed by BPA. It's hard to know what the future looks like for nuclear power in our state. I will say that, whether it's small modular or advanced reactor technology, that's like also many years away from really being deployed on a large scale on the grid, probably anywhere in the state, in the nation, not just potentially in Oregon, but anywhere in the nation. It's also have some uncertainty around costs, or perhaps a lot of uncertainty around cost. And so I think there's the industry expectations that costs will lower in the future and timelines will be shorter. I'm still waiting to see the results before sort of, we really might make an advocacy position towards something like that in the future for the state. The state right now is very neutral. We're just collecting information and trying to share that with the parties that might need that information. So that's a long ways away if that's going to be one of the part of Oregon's energy mix in the future, if ever.
Thanks for that, Max. I'm going to pause here. I know we've got a couple of more questions. I'm going through the chat. Do we have anybody else who wanted to put a hand up or come off mute while I'm looking at what's in the chat?
Bill has a question about BPA and transmission lines. Yeah, Bill, that's the information you put in the chat is a similar information that we have around Oregon's. I thought we were actually 49th amongst renewable energy build out and 50th being Washington State, but it's we're pretty close to the bottom of the list. It's a difficult system with Bonneville owning most of the transmission, as well as marketing the power from the dams and some other facilities, the nuclear power plant including, as well as having investor-owned utilities that have their own power grids, Pacific Power and Portland General. And then, of course, our 38 co-ops and municipal electric utilities. How do you get BP to upgrade their transmission systems? I think they actually are. I think they are working on projects right now. They might not be the very long high voltage lines that are new on the landscape, but they are always upgrading substations, individual segments. They have a fairly new line that crosses the river, the Columbia River near the Dalles. So there are upgrades that are happening on a regular basis to help increase the capacity of the grid and reliance of the grid. But it's a slow process. I mean, Tom mentioned that transmission is very difficult to build. I heard somebody from BPA say it's used to be difficult and now it's almost impossible to build new transmission, new high voltage lines. So I think the focus really from BPA as well as the big investor-owned utilities is to upgrade the lines that already exist. Perhaps we can get more power on the existing system without having to build new right-of-way for new transmission lines. It's a difficult challenge, though.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Max, on that last point you just mentioned, I've heard that too, that a lot of the focus is on just upgrading the lines themselves in the existing corridors. Do they have to upgrade the towers too if you've got bigger lines? I mean, is it as easy as just restringing a line with a bigger wire, or does it tend to be more complicated than that?
It could be either or, Jeff. It's a good question. And it depends on the existing capacity of a line, its sort of structural integrity, its history of when it was built. I know of locations where existing towers are able to take a new conductor, the wire that goes along a line to take more power. And there's also circumstances where the towers have to be rebuilt themselves, perhaps in the same footprint, but rebuilt with new steel or wood, depending on the type of power. So it could depend. There's also some other considerations on resilience measures. I've heard of transmission lines. This is again in wildfire-prone areas being rebuilt not only to increase power generation capacity, but for fire resilience measures, like wood being turned into steel that are more resistant to fire.
All right. I think Jeff, is your hand lingering? Okay, there we go. Making sure you didn't.
I do have more questions, but I'll get back in the back of line. Thanks.
I was gonna say, I think we've just got one more currently that was in the chat from Sarah. So if
Do you
we
want me
want to,
to just, so I was curious
Yeah.
with the different, like different sources of energy, thinking offshore wind could be one of them, oil and gas, natural gas, solar, wind. Is there a difference when it comes to what the source is, nuclear too, and how that impacts resilience?
I can jump into, oh, Max, do you want to go?
Anna, go ahead.
Okay. I think it's I would say a similar consideration to differences between those energy sources writ large. So when you're thinking about a wind or a solar, it's intermittent, right? So you need to have an ability to capture that energy and store it for when you may need it during resilience, during a power disruption. I think with fuels, there's a certainty there. You have your fuel supply. However, it is limited, unlike wind or the sun. It's got to start blowing again, the sun will start shining again. So I think those trade-offs and what you're looking at could prompt some similar considerations. I would say in terms of longevity of an outage and practicality of how much fuel could be stored, that could be pointing in a benefit towards a renewable energy source where you won't face that same limitation.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make sure we got to, Thina had a question before about California, and they still have their offshore wind leases. Oregon doesn't have any wind energy areas anymore. And Julia just kind of asked the similar question about regional coordination. I mean, even taking a step back from offshore wind, is there any sort of regional coordination between Washington, Oregon, Northern California for transmission resilience, any sort of energy considerations like that you guys are aware of or keeping an eye on?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of coordination in the region. And it's done at multiple levels. The utilities themselves, so you might think about the utilities having their assets across various state lines. And so they, by nature of what they do, Pacific Power, Pacific Core is serving a big region. Even PGE in the Portland area has assets outside of the state. But above that, there are multiple coordinating agencies, both government and quasi-government and sort of voluntary organizations that support electric grid resilience, power trading, making sure electricity is going where it's supposed to go, trying to keep costs low. There's quite a bit of coordination and information sharing. At the state government level, I will say it's perhaps like my agency, we do talk with our counterparts in Washington and California on a regular basis, but the planning of transmission grids tends to be done by the utilities, by the public utility commissions, as well as these sort of higher level regional bodies that coordinate that type of work.
Got it. Are you guys at all familiar with any of the Northern California plans for transmission upgrades? Because I know that for their two lease areas off of Humboldt County, there have been some plans to, build transmission to basically be able to even have offshore wind off of Northern California.
I couldn't speak to that. I suspect people on this call know that better than we do.
Okay. Jeff, I don't know if you had a follow-up to that or another question.
I was gonna switch gears, talk about resilience a little more. I have a twofer if you'll allow it. My first question is, what are the energy resilience options that people on the coast are reaching for now or should be reaching for? And then my second question is, where would you choose to go next on energy security and resilience research and planning if you had the ability and the funding?
That's a good question, Jeff. I suspect all of us might have, different thoughts and answers to that. The local diversified options for power generation seem like a wise idea. The community scale, the ability just to diversify resources is something that's smart to do. And even at the individual level, whether it's taking care of your own house or local facilities, that microgrid concept, microgrid, as Hannah explains, can be, as big as a community or a neighborhood, but it really is even just a building too. Think about a building that has a backup generator or some other sort of solar and battery storage kind of an idea. Fuel we think about electricity a lot, but also about fuel issues. Fuel distribution, liquid fuel distribution across the state has very long supply chains. And if I lived in the South Coast, which I don't, but if I lived particularly in the South Coast, it's quite far away from your fuel resupply hubs. You're probably getting gasoline and diesel from the Eugene fuel terminal. It's a long way. So I would think about ways to kind of diversify that, or perhaps reduce reliance upon, fuels that are more at risk from a disruption, something like that. Team, what else might you say? Tom, Traci, Hannah?
So one piece that we had as part of the energy security plan was looking at diversifying fuel resources for emergency response in the state. We developed a tool that state and local governments, agencies can assess the hazards at a potential site where they want to expand fuel storage for emergency response. And that could be for a generator at a hospital to have 2 weeks of fuel, or it could be for a public works yard to have additional fuel for ambulances and road repairs. So that's one mitigation piece, one resilience piece that isn't directly electric, but it is something that we're actively able to support local governments.
Yeah, and I would add to that, going back to the community resilience work that, Hannah has really been able to help develop and promote for us, that as we look at overall energy security, as Max said too, this is something we need to look at locally. And it goes, Tom's got a great point about the fuel tools we're trying to put in place, but it is broader than that. Building that awareness of the need for community resiliency and those community level resources. And that's where we're at a point with our energy security plan, is we are starting to look at what's next. How do we operationalize that plan, and how do we support not just our state partners, but how do we support our local and our tribal partners in developing what they think of as resiliency, and how do we support them in developing not just that concept, but those resources as well. So we have a lot of infrastructure questions that surround that. Again, Tom hit on the fuel, the fuel questions there. But we get questions about things like EV infrastructure, the electric vehicle infrastructure, and how that can be supported. And then, of course, working closely with PUC on anything related to our utilities for electric and natural gas as well. So we have quite a bit. We've got fortunately a fairly new program with energy security, and an opportunity to set some priorities that are in line with our state energy strategy that'll be coming out, as well as some other agency initiatives and what our partners are trying to do. I want to add to that, actually kind of connect that back. Jeff, I don't know if we answered all of your questions, but I want to make sure we highlight too that we've got a question still in the chat about where we are in the renewable energy transition plan. I feel like that's related to this discussion, so I want to draw attention back to that question as well. So Jeff, do we have anything else that we didn't answer for your two?
I'm interested in your answer to the other question too, so please go ahead.
Okay, And that one, I'll actually, Max, you may be the most familiar from an overall policy level. Do you want to address it's the one from Kevin, if we can get an update about the renewable energy transition plan and stretch goal completion?
Yeah, I think it's no secret that will be a challenge to meet those goals. You know, the Oregon has set very ambitious decarbonization greenhouse gas reduction goals from the power sector. And you know, they're pushing our utilities, power providers in the direction that, you know, the state wants to go, but I don't think it is going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to get to those goals. Our energy strategy that I dropped a link here in the chat has more information about the specifics. I might encourage you to take a look at that. But it's, you know, I think people are working pretty hard to try and get there. Whether we get there on, you know, the exact 2030, 2035 dates, you know, that might be tough. But I can tell you that every day we talk to people in utilities, private companies, state government levels that are working pretty hard to push to those goals.
All right, watching time, I just realized we were at 12:58, so the discussion took us right along here. And I think, Sarah, the last thing I think you just addressed the question about kind of that transmission expansion. So I think, can leave that one. Sarah, unless you have another question, was going to go back to our team for any other final comments, but. All right.
No.
I think we just say we're always open for more questions, and glad to, you know, just give us a call or an email to any of us. We've got a lot of resources on our website, and thanks for inviting us too, by the way, to Sarah and Jeff. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. This was really, really great. And I put in the chat, we have 2 more lunch and learns planned in October. So stay tuned. We may, as the roadmap starts to meet back up again in September, we're going to try to identify if there are other topics that we need to fill in. One of those is going to be a deeper dive into transmission. So we may be able to get to some of those other questions. And thank you guys all for coming. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Thanks, bye.